In a small car market headlining style over substance, the reality is that it's actually the most practical and affordable models that often sell most strongly. Models like this one, Vauxhall Viva. Parallels with older Vauxhalls bearing that badge are few, but one thing remains the same. You get a lot of car for the money.
It's about time Vauxhall brought us a really credible, super affordable 5-door city car, and this is it, the Viva. The name might be familiar, but the car is very much of its time, pitching the Griffin brand into contention in a segment that's doubled in size in recent years. Those, like me, of a certain age, might well warm to this car right up front, merely because of the badge on its boot lid. Vauxhall's original Viva models were made between 1963 and 1979 and transported a generation of budget-minded families. My dad had one, and an abiding memory of my childhood is of the black vinyl rear seats of his Viva and how they would become hotter than the surface of Venus during our summer road trips around Spain. It, of course, had no aircon and featured a rattly old 1.3 litre engine with suspension that owed more to horse and cart tech, but that old Viva never let us down. So, if you'll forgive a certain personal indulgence here, it's great to see Vauxhall revive the badge for a new generation. Clearly, of course, things have come on a long way since the last Viva rolled off the production line at the end of the 70s. Chevettes and Astras were the way forward then. But now there's space at the foot of Vauxhall's range for the Viva to be reborn as a 5-door city car and slot in below the brand's other small models, the slightly larger Corsa Super Mini and the fashionable 3-door Adam. In reality, this modern Viva's origins owe more to Chevrolet than they do to Vauxhall. For under the skin, this Korean-built design is essentially a second-generation version of the little Chevrolet Spark model that British buyers now won't get. Still, the market won't care where it comes from as long as it's affordable, efficient, practical, and offers plenty of style and frugal fun. On paper, the Viva seems to tick all of these boxes. Its 1-litre Ecotec petrol engine seems economical enough. There's modern connectivity for the Facebook generation, and a little extra size over the city car norm means that it ought to be practical too. It'll need a bit more than that, though, to make real headway in such a competitive segment. Does this Vauxhall have what it takes? Let's find out. Cars like this one belong in the city and should be fitted with an engine to match that remit. Not a diesel. Buyers wouldn't like the pricier fuel and the more expensive asking price. Not an electric or a hybrid unit either. The whole point is that a car of this kind should be really affordable. Instead, what's needed is a petrol engine fast enough to nip through gaps in traffic without being needlessly powerful. Given these criteria, we think Vauxhall has pitched things pretty much perfectly in equipping this car with a normally aspirated 75 PS version of the high-tech 3-cylinder 1-litre Ecotec petrol power plant that's found in turbocharged guise in the brand's Corsa and Adam models. It doesn't need to be turbocharged here because that kind of performance simply isn't required at this price point. The normally aspirated configuration is quite sufficient, and to be frank, we're a bit fed up with reading copy from spoiled hacks complaining that it doesn't make this Viva go very fast. The reality is that, as usual, they haven't done their homework. If you're comparing this Vauxhall against the entry-level 1-litre city car models it undercuts on price, then it's actually the fastest car in its class, dealing with the rest to 62 miles an hour sprint in 13.1 seconds en route to 106 miles an hour. Yes, there are city car contenders with more powerful engines that'll take you faster than that in this segment, but they'll cost you up to 30% more than Vauxhall is asking here. A good start then for the Griffin brand, that's aided by the way that the little 3-cylinder twin-cam engine is so quiet and smooth, with none of that thrummy buzziness that used to characterise triple-cylinder power plants in this segment. Well, that's just as well, because this one needs to be revved quite a lot if meaningful progress is to be made, and it doesn't deliver its peak 95 Newton meters of power until right up around 6,500 RPM. If you're running late or accelerating fully laden up a sloping incline, you'll need to make plenty of use of the 5-speed manual gearbox too, so it's just as well that the change action is slick and satisfying. You'd really have to be very urban bound to want to prefer the optional 5-speed Easytronic automatic transmission over this. I was, though, slightly surprised to find that the engineers haven't incorporated some kind of collar or depression mechanism on this stick shift manual setup for the engagement of reverse. As it is, it would be all too easy for a driver unfamiliar with this car to try and select an imaginary 6th gear at cruising speeds. On to ride quality, which is also pretty good. Perfected, says Vauxhall, over 12 months of development on UK roads. It's certainly firm and crashes a bit over deep potholes and speed humps, but overall deals with most of the poor and uneven surfaces you'll come across pretty well. Around town, you'll also appreciate the convenience of this city button that lightens the steering for simpler parking and facilitation of quite a tight 10.4 metre turning circle. On faster routes, though, the story's not quite so impressive. If we're talking twisty country roads, well, here you'll find that the steering system feels a touch vague, discouraging much of a dynamic driving style around tighter bends, which is a pity because grip is actually pretty good and body roll well controlled. As for venturing out onto the highway, the standard inclusion of big car features like front fog lights that turn with the corners and a lane departure warning system suggests that this car might be suited to the old longer jaunt. In reality, the wind noise and the tyre noise created by the boxy shape mean that there are better choices in this class if you do need to undertake the odd bit of motorway mileage in your city car. That said, the engine refinement I mentioned earlier makes up for a lot. Vauxhall doesn't need to make this model cutesy and cuddly. If that's the kind of thing you want from a city car, then the brand has its endlessly personalisable Adam model to suit. Instead, British designer Mark Adams and his team have decided that this Viva should be a more sensible proposition, though still a very smartly turned out one in a practically stylish sort of way, with a neat, precise design philosophy that, unlike some rivals, isn't too gender specific. The profile is probably its best feature, as usual with modern Vauxhalls, featuring this signature lower blade crease that we first saw on the brand's sleek GTC Coupe. Two other slashes define the sculpted flanks running through the front and rear door handles to give the shape some interest and attitude. I also like the way that the plastic wheel trims on this base spec model have been styled to look like proper alloys, though the real things do add an extra touch of style. The name offers a bit of interest too, especially for British buyers who remember the HA, HB and HC Viva models built in the 60s and 70s at Vauxhall's Ellesmere port plant near Liverpool. This car is a very different proposition, fundamentally a Korean-built Chevrolet, built in that country's GM plant at Shangwon, but here Vauxhall badged because of General Motors' decision to discontinue Chevrolet sales in this country. That's its real heritage, something that's easier to pick up from what is a very Chevy-style front end, despite the winged chrome grille bar and the prominent Griffin badge. The rear's nicely done, with curved tail lights that blend into the chamfered corners, body-coloured bumpers, a neat integrated roof spoiler below the bee-sting roof aerial, and another chromed badge to try and emphasise that borrowed Vauxhall parentage. Of more importance, though, is what lies beneath the light tailgate, a 206-litre boot that's about average in size for the class. True, it can't deliver the amount of space that you get in models like Hyundai's i10, Suzuki Celerio, or the Volkswagen Up, Skoda Citigo, Seat Mii shared design, but it is equal in size to the cargo area that you'd find in the Peugeot 108, Citroën C1, Toyota Aygo shared design, and similar too to the trunk size provided by rivals like Renault's Twingo and Kia's Picanto. There are a couple of hooks to secure shopping, and if you need more room, then pushing forward the standard 60-40 split rear bench reveals up to 1,013 litres, although the seats don't fold completely flat. Time to take a seat in the rear. This car is 140 millimetres longer than something comparable like a Volkswagen Up and has over 100 millimetres more wheelbase length than you get in a rival like that shared Peugeot, Citroën, Toyota citycar design that I just mentioned. These are differences that you notice here. The Viva's back seat offers enough room for a 6-footer to sit behind a similarly sized driver. We'd also want to specify the extra cost Flex Connect system that clips onto these front seat backs and gives you attachments that'll hold a flask, a shopping bag or a jacket in place. Plus they'll hold a tablet too, so at minimal cost you can get yourself what amounts to a rear seat infotainment system to keep the kids quiet, if necessary. Talking of kids, equally important for me as a family man is that you get 3 proper seatbelts in the back. Most rivals in this class only provide 2. No, of course, 3 adults wouldn't want to sit alongside each other for very long, although should that be necessary, the boxy shaped decent levels of headroom will help. The point here though is that a trio of kids could be accommodated if necessary. That feature alone would make me much more likely to consider this car. Up front, trendy design flourishes have been kept to a minimum. As I suggested earlier, those wanting something more outre or personalised will need to step up to the brand's trendier Adam model. And as usual in this segment, the kind of soft-touch plastics that you'd find on today's larger models are noticeable by their absence. With all of that said though, this is one of the nicer looking cabins in this segment and looks especially good with the 2-tone fascia and stitched leather steering wheel of the top SL trimmed model. There are reasonably sized door pockets and 2 drinks holders in the front centre console, plus plenty of cubbies for squirreling away your personal belongings, with the small storage areas above the central console and above the reasonably sized glove box being especially ideal for things like smartphones and loose change. Once you're settled, you might find that this isn't the easiest city car to see out of. The stubby nose dives away out of sight, and the narrow rear screen would make me want to pay extra for rear parking sensors. Still, it is easy to get comfortable, despite the fact that the Corsa-derived 3-spoke multifunction steering wheel adjusts only for rake and not for reach. That's because the seat is quite supportive and height adjustable as standard across the range. Ahead of you lies a simple but classy 2-dial instrument cluster with the main 2 gauges separated by a trip computer and chunky switchgear that operates with a solid click. Over to your left, a smart gloss black trimmed panel surrounds the clear and neatly presented stereo, mounted nice and high up so you don't have to take your eyes off the road for too long to use it. Lower down in the central stack are the controls for the ventilation and the air conditioning system that you won't get if you opt for the frugal EcoFlex model. Everything's simple to use and as straightforward to get to grips with as operating a payphone. A payphone. That gives my age away, doesn't it? I don't think I'm the kind of person being targeted by this car's key interior optional feature, Vauxhall's IntelliLink infotainment system. Now, when fitted, this setup's 7-inch colour touchscreen dominates the centre of the dash and deals with stereo and smartphone duties, along with USB and Bluetooth connectivity. The system also stores your videos and shows your personal pictures and downloads your favourite apps. What you can't do is use it to play old-fashioned CDs, but there I suppose I'm showing my age again. Where once Vauxhall had its Chevrolet sister brand to compete with the very cheapest offerings in the city car segment, the company must now alone take on the most affordable models in this sector. Hence, tight pricing for this Viva in the £8,000 to £10,000 bracket. Figures that see it offering a saving around £1,800 over a directly comparable 70 PS 5-door version of Vauxhall's only slightly larger Corsa Super Mini. Buying a Viva should certainly be a pretty straightforward process. There's just one 5-door body style and the range was launched with a single 75 PS 1-litre Ecotec petrol engine with a choice of manual or Easytronic automatic transmission. The trim structure is pretty simple too. Most will want the base spec, which comes in either aircon or Ecoflex guises, but if you'd like something a bit nicer, there is a plusher SL option at the top of the range. To understand the value proposition that pricing represents, you need to know a little about models in the city car segment. With these, in nearly every case, you're offered a choice of two petrol engines. A feebler one, typically with an output of between 60 and 70 PS, and a faster one, usually putting out between 75 and 90 PS. This Viva's single 75 PS engine is closer in performance to the pokier of those two options, and if you evaluate it on that basis, this car is going to seem very good value indeed. After all, a comparably performing 1-litre 75 PS Volkswagen Up, Skoda Citigo or Seat Mii could easily cost you a couple of thousand more than a Viva, which is a big pricing gap in this part of the market. Even if you look at those three shared development models in their entry-level 60 PS guises, you'd still get a saving at least around £600 by choosing the Vauxhall, and over £1,000 if you compare against the Volkswagen. The Viva's value proposition looks equally good if you compare it against the other key shared design in this segment, the one we know either as a Peugeot 108, a Citroën C1 or a Toyota Aygo. The cheapest 1-litre 69 PS 5-door version of the Aygo costs around £1,000 more than a Viva, to around £9,000, while the cheapest 5-door version of the 108 and the C1 will need a £10,000 budget. In all three cases, you'll not only be paying more, but also getting a smaller car with less performance. Also smaller, slower and much more expensive is the Renault Twingo Smart 4 shared design. You'll pay at least £1,500 more for the Twingo and over £3,000 more for the Smart. Yes, you will get fashionable looks and a clever rear-engined rear-wheel drive layout, but that is a big price differential to swallow. Are there other 5-door city car options you could consider? A few. Entry-level versions of cars like Mitsubishi's Mirage, Nissan's Micra and Fiat's Panda are all possible choices, but in selecting them you'll have to find around £1,000 more than Vauxhall is asking here and accept lower equipment levels and slightly less performance. A marginally closer match for the Viva's proposition is provided by a Hyundai i10 that should give you reasonable change from £9,000. But the only rivals that can really match this Vauxhall on price are 1-litre versions of the Kia Picanto and Suzuki Celerio. Both options will give you less equipment and performance, while the Kia offers significantly less interior space. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Viva that you really want, then you're probably going to be pretty pleased with your choice when you come to consider the standard specification that Vauxhall is offering across the range. Even the least expensive SE Viva versions do, after all, come complete with items you might have to pay extra for on the very cheapest derivatives of some rivals. Things like daytime running lights, an alarm, powered door mirrors, steering wheel audio controls, city mode to lighten the steering when you're parking, and driver's seat height adjustment. And impressively, all Viva variants get features that you'd have to do without on all but the most ridiculously priced versions of rivals. Things like heated mirrors, front fog lights with a cornering function and cruise control with a speed limiter that'll help safeguard your licence in roadworks or urban areas. That's in addition to the standard stuff you now expect on a car in this class. 60/40 split folding rear seats, a trip computer and a decent quality 4-speaker stereo with aux-in connectivity. As I mentioned earlier, Viva SE buyers get the option of air conditioning if they don't want the frugally orientated Ecoflex specification that gives you front and rear spoilers and low rolling resistance tyres. Otherwise, it's a question of whether you think it's worth the extra £1,500 Vauxhall asks to get this car in its top SL guise. The extra outlay gets you 15-inch alloy wheels and dark-tinted rear windows, while inside there's climate control, a leather-coloured steering wheel, a better quality 6-speaker stereo and both USB and Bluetooth connectivity. The other feature that for us would make SL trim well worth stretching to is the included OnStar safety and security connectivity package. It's also an option if you go for a base-trimmed Viva model. The system allows you to create in your car a Wi-Fi hotspot into which up to 7 devices can be connected. Plus, via an included smartphone app, you'll be able to call the OnStar help desk at any time to access important vehicle data like oil levels and tyre pressures. You'll also be able to remotely lock or unlock your car if you've lost the keys, and locate your Viva using a stolen vehicle assistance service, should it ever be stolen. OnStar's also there in case of emergency and will automatically summon the assistance should an airbag deploy, giving the emergency service your exact GPS location. Now, that could be a lifesaver. So you're probably getting the idea as we go along here. This car's much better specified than its modest pricing would lead you to expect. So much so, in fact, that the options list is fairly short. Though one feature that is well worth considering is Vauxhall's neat IntelliLink infotainment system. This is one of the first setups of its kind to be able to communicate with both Apple and Android devices and applications, and it's operable either via a 7-inch colour touchscreen or through the steering wheel switchgear. As you'd expect, IntelliLink deals with stereo and smartphone duties through the home page's phone and audio options, but it can go a lot further than that. Thanks to USB and Bluetooth connectivity, the gallery section can play your stored videos and show your personal pictures, while the apps section can link you in with approved apps like Stitcher, the global podcast internet radio system, and Bringo, a navigation app that's likely in future to make many extra-cost sat-nav systems redundant. If you have an Apple device to link in, then you can also use the Siri Eyes-free voice control feature that allows you to hear an incoming text read aloud or dictate texts and emails, all without taking your eyes off the road. And other options? Well, as I've suggested, there aren't too many. Vauxhall hasn't bothered offering the trendy lifestyle personalisation packages that you find on other rivals. In fact, the only way you can add to the aesthetics is to specify larger 16-inch alloy wheels, jet black B-pillar decals, stainless steel door sill plates, and the extra cost metallic paint that we have here. Other additional features you might want to look at include practicalities like floor mats and a space-saver spare wheel that'll save you having to mess around with a tyre inflation kit that you're otherwise stuck with. There's also an electric glass sliding sunroof and a winter pack that gives you heat for the seats and the steering wheel. We'd also want to look at rear parking sensors and the neat Flex Connect system that clips onto the front seat backs and gives you attachments that'll hold a flask, a tablet, a shopping bag or a jacket in place. Finally, there is no separate satellite navigation system option, as I mentioned earlier. Vauxhall thinks that those wanting that will get the IntelliLink setup and access navigation through a smartphone app. On to safety, an area that sees this car match the standards of citycar models that would cost you thousands more. That's thanks to the standard inclusion across the range of features like tyre pressure monitoring and a lane departure warning system that stops dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. There are the usual electronic aids for braking and traction and stability control, plus hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. And twin front, side and curtain airbags, a pedestrian-friendly bonnet and Isofix child seat fastenings. On to fuel economy, an area where this car simply has to perform in this segment. The single 1-litre 3-cylinder Ecotec petrol unit on offer uses the same technology that you'll find in Vauxhall's other small Adam and Corsa models, fashioned from light aluminium and designed with refinement in mind. This engine's internal friction levels are much lower than they would be in a comparable 4-cylinder unit, and it runs on low viscosity oils, all these features contributing to impressive levels of running efficiency. To be specific, that means a standard manual gearbox Viva variant can deliver 62.8 miles per gallon on the combined cycle, which should give you a reasonable operating range, despite the relatively small 32-litre size of the fuel tank. Vauxhall reckons that you could eke out as much as 460 miles from full to empty, though to replicate that, I think you'd really have to be driving like Miss Marple. The CO2 return is rated at 104 grams per kilometre. If you want even better running cost figures and you don't mind doing without air conditioning, then you can opt for an SE EcoFlex variant that, thanks to low rolling resistance tyres and various aerodynamic improvements, can enhance those figures significantly. Keep an eye on the dashboard gear change light that'll help with optimal gear changes, and the official figures suggest that an EcoFlex Viva will be able to return 65.7 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2. The latter figure gives you a low benefit-in-kind company car taxation rating of 14%, and it means you won't have to pay a penny in road tax. Doubtless, Vauxhall could have improved further on these fuel and CO2 stats if they'd fitted this car with a 6-speed manual gearbox and an engine stop-start system. What else? Well, there's the usual unremarkable 3-year, 60,000-mile warranty. Residuals will probably be par for the course for a mainstream branded model in this class, and insurance is rated at 3E. Finally, servicing is every year or 20,000 miles, whichever comes first, and a fixed price service plan is available. Ultimately, the basics just have to be right for a model in this segment, and here most of them are. True, this isn't the most economical or the most spacious city car you can buy, but it does enough in both of these areas to satisfy the needs of most buyers, and does so at a price that makes many rivals look needlessly expensive. Okay, so the Viva badge unashamedly plunders a bit of retro appeal, but Vauxhall needs this car to be noticed. Unlike the company's flashier Adams small Runabout, there are no styling gimmicks or fashionable personalisation options to make it stand out in the showroom. Instead, the Griffin brand is relying on buyers to appreciate this car's common sense and no-nonsense approach to things, and the way that it's been equipped far beyond the level you'd expect it to be for the money. Will all of this be enough to allow the brand to carve out a meaningful niche in this segment? Time will tell, but we'd suggest the signs to be promising. Vauxhall having given this Viva every chance to succeed. They've delivered us a contender bearing a British badge with German heritage from an American company and a design that's been screwed together in Korea, proving beyond doubt that even with tiny cars, manufacturers have to think big.